there's a quiet kind of tiredness that doesn't come from doing too much, but from noticing more than you'd like to, from feeling shifts in a room before anyone speaks, and sensing meanings that never quite get said. And when that sounds familiar, it's often because your mind has learned to listen deeply, sometimes too deeply. And if reflections like this make you feel a small sense of recognition, you're welcome to stay and subscribe whenever it feels right, as we begin to explore what it really means to be too aware, seeing what others don't notice. Being too aware is often mistaken for being overly sensitive or distracted by details that don't matter. But for some people, awareness is not a choice. It is the way their attention naturally rests. They notice the pause before someone answers, the shift in tone that doesn't match the words, the quiet tension that fills a room even when everyone is smiling. It's like walking through a familiar street at night and seeing which windows still have lights on. This kind of awareness doesn't come from suspicion. It comes from attunement. Inside, there is a constant gentle scanning, not to judge, but to understand. Sometimes it shows up in small moments, sitting across from a friend, feeling that something is off, even when nothing is said. That awareness doesn't demand action. It simply settles in the chest, heavy but calm. Over time, people like this learn that what they see isn't always welcomed, so they grow quieter about it, not because they're wrong, but because they're early. And being early can feel lonely in its own quiet way. When awareness becomes weight. At a certain point, awareness stops feeling like clarity and starts feeling like weight. Not because it's inaccurate, but because it accumulates. Each unnoticed emotion, each unspoken tension, each subtle shift gets stored somewhere inside. It's like carrying groceries without a bag. Manageable at first, then slowly uncomfortable. People who are deeply aware often don't realize how much they're holding until they sit alone in the evening and feel tired without knowing why. The mind keeps replaying small details. A look that lingered too long, a silence that meant more than it seemed. This isn't overthinking in the dramatic sense. It's more like a low hum that never quite turns off. Awareness becomes heavy when there's no place to set it down. And yet, many people continue carrying it quietly, believing that this is just how being attentive feels. There is no crisis, no collapse, just a steady sense of internal fullness. Recognizing that this weight exists can be relieving. It doesn't mean something is wrong. It means the mind has been working very hard for a very long time. Awareness turns into distance. When someone sees too much, closeness can begin to feel complicated. Not because they don't want connection, but because connection requires a certain amount of unknowing. Deeply aware, people often sense emotional shifts before they're spoken, which creates a strange gap. They are present, listening, nodding, but part of them has already stepped back. It's like watching a conversation from a few inches behind your own eyes. Distance forms not out of superiority, but out of protection. When you understand others quickly, you also understand how easily things can fracture. So you soften your presence. You choose your words carefully. You leave pauses where honesty could have been. This distance isn't coldness, it's restraint. In quiet moments, like standing in a kitchen after guests leave, there's a feeling of having been there without fully arriving. That space isn't emptiness, it's caution. Over time, this pattern can feel isolating, but it also makes sense. Awareness teaches you how fragile moments are, and distance becomes a way of holding them without breaking them. From awareness to hypervigilance, there is a thin line between awareness and hypervigilance, and many people cross it without noticing. Awareness listens. Hypervigilance braces. What begins as sensitivity slowly turns into constant readiness, as if something might go wrong at any moment. The body remembers past emotional surprises, even small ones, so the mind stays alert, not anxious in a loud way, just tense, like shoulders that never fully drop. Everyday situations start to feel loaded. A delayed reply, a change in routine, a subtle shift in mood. None of these are dramatic, but together they create a feeling of always being on watch. Often, this develops quietly, shaped by environments where emotional awareness was necessary. In the stillness of late night, when everything finally slows down, there's sometimes a sense of exhaustion mixed with relief. Nothing happened. It's okay. Understanding this shift matters, not to force change, but to soften self-blame. Hypervigilance isn't a flaw. It's awareness that learned to stay awake longer than it needed to. Lonely, even among people. One of the quietest consequences of deep awareness is a specific kind of loneliness. Not the absence of people, but the feeling of being unseen while surrounded. When you notice others deeply, you often do so without being noticed in return. Conversations move forward. Laughter fills the space, yet something inside remains untouched. It can feel like standing at the edge of a crowd, hearing everything clearly, but never fully stepping in. This loneliness doesn't come from rejection. It comes from mismatch. Awareness creates depth, but depth needs resonance. In small moments, like sitting at a table, tracing the rim of a glass while others talk, you may feel both present and separate. That duality can be confusing, but it's also human. Many people who feel this way assume they're doing something wrong socially. Often, they're simply tuned to a different frequency. Naming this loneliness doesn't make it disappear, but it makes it less heavy. It reminds you that the feeling isn't proof of disconnection, just evidence of sensitivity meeting a world that moves faster. The hidden cost of understanding others. Understanding others easily is often praised, but its cost is rarely acknowledged. When you intuit what someone is feeling, you instinctively make room for it. You adjust. You accommodate. Over time, this can quietly erase parts of yourself. It happens in small ways. Letting a comment pass, holding back a truth, absorbing tension so others don't have to. None of this feels dramatic in the moment. It feels considerate. But the accumulation leaves a trace in quiet moments alone, like folding laundry or staring out a window. You may feel strangely empty, as if something was given away without being noticed. This isn't martyrdom. It's a habit formed from empathy. Recognizing the cost doesn't mean withdrawing from others. It simply brings balance back into focus. Understanding doesn't require self-erasure. And realizing that truth can feel like setting down a bag you didn't realize you were carrying. When awareness softens into wisdom, there is a stage where awareness changes texture. It stops gripping and starts flowing. Wisdom isn't louder than awareness. It's gentler. It comes when noticing no longer demands response. When understanding others doesn't automatically mean absorbing them. This shift often happens slowly, without announcement. One day, you notice a familiar emotional pattern, but instead of tightening, you breathe. You let it be. Wisdom looks like sitting with a feeling without analyzing it to exhaustion. It's knowing when to engage and when to rest. In the quiet of a morning or the calm of an empty room, awareness becomes something warm rather than sharp. This isn't a transformation into someone else. It's awareness, learning its own boundaries. Nothing is lost in this softening. If anything, depth becomes more sustainable. And in that sustainability, there's relief. Not the kind that erases sensitivity, but the kind that allows it to stay. Closing. Awareness with boundaries. Awareness doesn't need to disappear to become livable. What it needs is containment. Boundaries aren't walls. They're edges. They define where understanding ends and self-preservation begins. For deeply aware people, this can feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable. There may be guilt in not noticing everything, in not holding every emotional shift. But boundaries don't dull awareness, they protect it. In everyday moments, choosing silence instead of explanation, stepping away instead of staying late, something subtle changes. The inner space feels clearer, not emptier, just quieter. Awareness with boundaries feels like standing near the ocean without being pulled under by every wave. It allows connection without depletion. There is no final arrival here, no perfect balance, just an ongoing adjustment, and that's enough. Awareness doesn't have to cost you yourself. It can coexist with rest, with distance, with choice. And that understanding lingers gently, long after the moment passes. Awareness, when held quietly, doesn't announce itself. It settles like evening light in a familiar room, changing how everything feels without moving a single object. It doesn't make life louder or clearer, only more layered, where small moments carry weight and silences speak longer than words. There's a sense that something has been recognized, not solved, not fixed, but gently named, the way you notice your own breathing after a long pause. And somewhere in that recognition, the attention naturally turns inward, to the patterns you've carried without ever calling them patterns, to sensitivities that didn't arrive suddenly, but grew with you. If this feels familiar, it may be because this way of noticing the world has been quietly shaping your inner life for years. That line of thought often drifts back further, toward childhood, toward people who learned to read rooms early, who adapted before they understood why. The psychology of being too aware often shares its roots with children who grew up too fast, where perception became a form of protection long before it became insight. And perhaps that connection doesn't ask to be explained yet, only felt, lingering just long enough to invite you to stay a little closer with it.